Okay, so moving along with Christ, the eternal Tao. Last time, read through the first Ennead. I think it's pronounced Ennead actually. Remember, there's our nine chapters or 9 Enneads made up of 9 chapters each. The first one was called "In the Beginning Was the Way." The second Ennead is "The Coming of the Way," which I'll read the 9 chapters here right now for you. So starting at chapter 10. Before the Word came into the world, the sages sought him out in every place. They saw him not, but sensed his presence everywhere. They found him in living beings, in mountain crags, in flowing streams, in seas and winds. He was not these things, but he spoke in these things, guiding them. All things followed his course. Therefore the sages called him also by his other name, the Way, the Tao. The course that all things are to follow. The trees, the birds, the rivers, and winds, these had no choice but to follow the way. Man alone is given choice. Man alone can follow or go his own way. If he follows the way, he will suffer with the pain of the world, but he will find the original harmony. If he follows his own way, he will suffer only with himself, and within him will be chaos. Chapter 11. Before he came into the world, the sages tried to describe the way that all things must follow, and man if he chooses. Not having seen him, but only his traces, the sages could only speak in dim verses and riddles. Some things they did know, even from his traces, as he passed silently and visibly through the canyons. What was this course that all things followed? No thing existed for itself. Each thing humbly, patiently, fulfilled its designation without thinking, without possessing or rebelling or complaining or laying blame or taking credit or seeking honor. In this way, the roaring ocean and mighty wind were as meek as the still pond. One thing dies without thinking, that others may live. A seed falls to the ground and dies, and from it comes a tree bearing fruit and more seeds beyond counting. If the seed is preserved whole, nothing will come from it. Only if it dies will it give life. This is the way, the pattern that all things follow, knew the ancient sage. Continuing. This is how we can describe the way. For what the way does, the way is. Thus said the ancient sage, quote, there must be one, an original principle of all things, which reveals the mother of all things. Having found the mother, we know the child. Knowing the child, we then observe the mother, unquote. For does not the vessel crafted harmoniously speak of the artist? If all things that are made follow the way, does not the maker of things follow it also? If each thing that is made serves another, and all things serve the whole, does not the way serve also? But whom does the way serve? If all created things, save man, humbly, patiently fulfill the designation of their existence on earth, should not the way do the same? But how can he, if he does not walk the earth as do created things? And if he did, what would be his designation? And if one thing must die that others may live, should not the way do the same? But how was the way to die? And whom was he to die for? This was the mystery before his coming. The sages knew of his meekness, his lowliness, his selflessness and patience, his calmness in his mighty deeds, his gentleness and his strength. They knew that as each thing serves another, so does the maker of things serve all things. They knew that at each thing dies for another, so it is for the way to die for all things. This they knew, but of the greatest mystery, his perfect love, which existed before the world, they could not know, until he had walked among them held their head against his breast, spoken to them with living breath, entered into them through his flesh and blood, and vowed that he would never leave them. Chapter 12. Before the Way came to earth, he was known to have distinct qualities and properties, as does a person. And yet the ancient sage, not having seen him, could not know him fully as a person. To the sage he was, as it were, a person without a face or name. A person who spoke no words, left no report of his coming, no footprints. A person who could not be touched. Therefore the sage could but call him the uncertainty. Looked for, he said, but invisible. The Way may be called the indistinguishable. Listened for, but inaudible. It may be called the elusive, grasped at, but unattainable. It may be called the subtle. These three cannot be discovered in investigation, for they blend into one. This appears as darkness. For the sage, the Way dwelt in the darkness of incomprehensibility. Yet he was not that darkness. The Way dwelt beyond all being. Yet he was not being. He was not non-being. The Way emptied himself, yet he was not emptiness. He was not an eternal void, for he existed in eternity. Therefore, said the sage, quote, the Way, considered as a reality, is impalpable, indefinite. But within this impalpability, there is form. Within this indefiniteness, there is being. Dark and dim, within is the essence. The essence being supremely true. Within is the true evidence. For the sage, the Way could not even be known wholly as person. But neither was he wholly impersonal, for he was known to care for the 10,000 things. Therefore, said the sage, quote, all things arise from the Way, and by the power of the Way they are nourished, developed, cared for, sheltered, comforted, grown, and protected, unquote. Quote again, is the Way a child of something else? Is the Way a child of something else? The sage asked, but could not answer. The sage had not seen the mind who had given birth to the Word outside time. For he who has seen the Word has seen the Father mind. And the Word, the mind's first interpreter and herald, had not yet revealed his face, had not yet revealed himself as person. Chapter 13. In finding the traces of the Way in nature, the sage found the simple nature from which man had departed. Quote, return to the babe, unquote, he said. Quote, return to the state of the uncovered, uncarved block, the pristine simplicity, the primitive origin of man. Here, indeed, is the main thread of the Way. In his infancy, his primitive origin, mankind had been made to rejoice in the Way, his source, to abide in him, to cleave to him, and never depart. Made to raise himself above the things of the senses, above every bodily appearance, to become selfless like the Way, to go beyond himself in selfless love, to contemplate the Way extending into the universe, to know the inner essence of created things, and moving beyond, even beyond these, to behold the primal Word, seeing in him in purity and stillness of thought the image of the primal mind. Such was man's original nature, the state of the uncarved block, the pristine simplicity in which the simple and undivided Way made him, in which he was ever to remain, but from which he had departed. For, not striving to go beyond himself, he preferred to seek things nearer to himself, the body and its senses. Removing himself from the invisible Way, he began to regard his own self, his own visible self. Therefore the ancient sage, seeking to return to his original nature, to the immaterial source beyond the realm of sense, said, quote, one's perfect virtue lies in his conformity to the Way. The Way may be styled the form of the formless, the image of the imageless. Go out to meet it, and you will discover no beginning, Follow after and you will discover no end. Lay hold of this ancient doctrine and apply it to the nourishment of your soul. You will then understand the primitive origin of man, the main thread of the way. Close quote. Chapter 14. When my contemplation is complete, said the ancient sage, and quiescence is maintained unalloyed, though the various forms are restless, I am looking for the return to nature. Before the way came into the world, the restless world groaned for his coming. For the one being who had been given the choice of whether to follow the way had departed from the way, disturbing the original harmony. The one who had been given governance over nature had departed from his own governor and from nature, disturbing the original hierarchy. Made to find pleasure in the way, he had instead found pleasure through his senses. Made to desire the way, he had instead desired created things. Made to remain in primal simplicity, he had fragmented himself into many parts. Going against his primitive origin, ancient man had entered into contention against himself, contending with himself and others for the object of desire. He had spread contention throughout the earth, having corrupted his own nature. He had brought all nature into corruption with him. Therefore did the various forms that were made groan for their maker, to restore the lost one to the way, to return him to his true nature, to cleanse the filth of his corruption, and thus regain the original harmony. Though the various forms are restless, I am looking for the return to nature. Do you hear the restless earth? Its groaning, O ancient man, O lost one. It is not the wind, for all things are still. The lake is calm, the leaves do not rustle on the trees, and yet the spirit hears that cry, that never-ceasing moan that existed before your kingdoms. You covered the earth with your kingdoms in order to stifle that cry. But it would not be smothered under stones. Your mind speaks incessantly with the voice of desire in order to drown out that cry. But the heart hears it beneath the mind's din. To the ears it is a silent moan. To the spirit it is louder than the mightiest tempest that the elements can make. Will he come then? He will come. He will come? How will he come? It is man who disturbed the great harmony. Therefore, as a man, he will come to restore it. Whither will he come? The way always seeks the lowest place. Beautiful. Chapter 15. Quote, the valley and the spirit do not die, unquote, said the ancient sage. Quote, they form what is called the mystic mother, from whose gate comes the origin of heaven and earth, unquote. And this gate shall be shut, said the ancient prophet. Quote, it shall not be opened, and no one shall pass through it, for the Lord shall enter by it, unquote. The mind spoke, and through his word answered the earth's elemental moan. Above the roaring cry, he answered with a still, small voice, I will come. Will you receive me then? But no man heard that voice, only a small young woman who had lived unknown in silence and purity in the great temple was given to hear it. And in a still, small voice, she gave voice to the whole earth. She answered for all those beings in created forms who could not speak. She answered for all the people who could not hear. And to the question of the uncreated mind, she answered, yes, I will receive you, but it unto me according to your word. In her, the way had found the lowest place in the entire earth, the nadir of the valley, the supreme humility, lowliness. And there he came and made his abode. He took flesh of her, whom he loved above all others who dwelled on the earth. He was meek and humble like himself. Who was meek and humble like himself, and lowering himself, emptying himself in his love to the lowest place. He became a tiny child within her, the mystic mother. Because of her profound and intangible humility, her gate opened by no man, through which no one had passed through, became the gate from which came the origin of heaven and earth. Because she had returned to the state of the uncarved block, the pristine simplicity, she became the mountain unhewn by the hand of man, whom the ancient prophet had foretold, and the spirit, the breath of heaven, rested upon her. the valley of humility, as he had upon the first formed world. Chapter 16. Water, said the ancient sage, greatly benefits all things, but does not compete with them. It dwells in lowly places that all disdain, and so it is like the way. The way came down and emptied himself in a lowly cave, not amidst human dwellings, but in the home of lowly animals. Born on a lowly bed, dirty straw strewn on the ground, happy, prosperous people slept in soft beds in the nearby inn. But while other infants wept that night, he was silent, and the sheep bleated like rippling water. Chapter 17. The way continuously creates, said the ancient sage, and the power of the way nourishes, enlarges, feeds, completes, matures, cherishes, and broods over all things. The way creates but does not demand for itself, acts but is not boastful, controls but without compulsion. This may be called the mystery of the power of the way. The 10,000 things all honor the way and respect its power, but without demand or orders. When the way came to earth quietly under the cloak of flesh, he did not demand respect, nor was he wont to reveal his true nature. A name worthy of all honor, he left it to those whom he had made to utter his name. Word of the mind, Son of the Father, Son of the living God, hiding his glory in the deep pools of the valley, he called himself rather, quote, the least in the kingdom of heaven, unquote, and, quote, the Son of Man, unquote. For he had made himself the Son, the offspring of his own offspring, lowering himself beneath man, who had falsely exalted himself. Thus, to whom the 10,000 things have honored and respect, gave honor to his one disobedient child, man, as a child gives honor to his parent. Last chapter in this Ennead. The great way, said the ancient sage, flows everywhere. It may go left or right. All things depend on it. None is refused. It fulfills its purpose silently. It does not take possession. He shall not cry nor lift up, said the ancient prophet, nor cause his voice to be heard in the street. A bruised reed shall not break, and the smoking flax shall he not quench. So did the great way come, he who shakes the earth and stirs the roaring winds and crashes seas, came softly, silently. The great way clothes and feeds all things, said the ancient sage. Yes, yet does not claim them as its own. All things return to it, yet it claims no leadership over them. When the great way came into the world, he claimed no worldly leadership. But said to those whom he had made, I am among you as he who serves. He is oppressed, said the ancient prophet, and he is afflicted, yet he opens not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb before the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearer is dumb. So he opens not his mouth, for the way is silent, and the ancient sage, silent and boundless. So that was the second Ennead. Next time we'll be doing the third, which is the opening of the way.